Breaking tonight, America's trade war strategy just cracked from the inside. The U.S. House of Representatives didn't just vote, they revolted. Tensions are escalating in Washington tonight. Donald Trump built his entire second term around one economic weapon: tariffs. He called them national security. He called them leverage. He called them the cornerstone of American power. But tonight, his own party fractured. His own house turned. And Canada, the country Trump tried to bully into submission, is watching this unfold with quiet, calculated satisfaction. Everyone believed Trump's tariff wall against Canada was untouchable. Republican leadership blocked every attempt to challenge it. Wall Street assumed the emergency declaration would stand unchallenged through the summer. Analysts said Congress would never muster the political courage to defy a president who threatens primary challengers against anyone who steps out of line. They were all utterly incorrect. Washington, D.C., Wednesday. The House floor erupted into one of the most significant votes of this congressional session: 219 to 211. A resolution to terminate the very national emergency Trump invented to justify his tariffs on Canadian goods passed. 6 Republicans broke ranks. 6 members of Trump's own party looked at the evidence, looked at the economic damage, looked at the absurdity of calling Canada a national security threat, and said no. Translation: the wall Trump built around his tariff policy just developed 6 very visible cracks, and those cracks are spreading. Dear viewers, let's understand exactly what happened here, because the mainstream coverage is going to bury the most important detail. This vote didn't materialize overnight. Democrats introduced this resolution back in March of last year. For months, Republican leadership did everything in their power to prevent it from reaching the floor. Speaker Mike Johnson deployed procedural maneuvers, blocked debate schedules, and tried to ram through a rule that would have barred any tariff-related votes through the end of July. That blocking effort collapsed on Tuesday. 3 Republicans joined every single Democrat to vote down Johnson's procedural shield: 217 to 214. The margin was razor-thin. 3 votes. That's all it took to shatter Republican leadership's ability to protect Trump's trade war from Democratic scrutiny. And what happened the very next day? The full House voted to terminate the emergency. 6 Republicans crossed the line. Not just 1 or 2 symbolic defections. 6. From Nebraska, Pennsylvania, Colorado, California, Kentucky, Washington State. Now here's what makes this devastating for the White House. These aren't random backbenchers. These are representatives from states whose economies are bleeding because of Trump's tariffs on Canada. Dan Newhouse from Washington State put it plainly after casting his vote: the tariffs on Canada have harmed Washingtonians. His state's economy is deeply intertwined with Canada's. Don Bacon from Nebraska called tariffs a significant tax on American consumers, manufacturers, and farmers. He said they've been a net negative for the economy. These aren't Democratic talking points. These are Republican lawmakers from Trump's own party telling the American public what Ottawa has been saying for over a year. The tariffs hurt Americans. The emergency is manufactured. And Canada was never the threat. Now let me explain why this matters so deeply for Canada's strategic position. When Trump first slapped 35% tariffs on Canadian goods back in February 2025, he justified it with a national emergency declaration. The claim? That Canada's supposed failure to address cross-border fentanyl trafficking created an unusual and extraordinary threat to U.S. national security. Ottawa pushed back immediately, diplomatically, firmly, and with evidence. Canada tightened border enforcement. Canada invested in counter-narcotics cooperation. Canada did the work. But here's the thing: Ottawa understood that most commentators missed. You don't win against a bully by matching their volume. You win by letting reality do the talking. And reality, dear viewers, just spoke through the U.S. House of Representatives. Representative Gregory Meeks, the Democrat from New York, who introduced this resolution, said it from the House floor with a clarity that cut through every layer of political noise. Canada isn't a threat. Canada is our friend. Canada is our ally. He called these tariffs exactly what they are: unnecessary and harmful taxes on the American people. And that's the core of it. That's what Canada's diplomatic strategy has been building toward. Not convincing foreign governments through aggressive rhetoric or retaliatory escalation, but allowing the economic evidence to accumulate until the weight of it became politically unbearable inside Washington itself. The opposition didn't come from Ottawa. It came from Nebraska. It came from Pennsylvania. It came from the American heartland, from the farmers, manufacturers, and consumers who are paying the price for Trump's invented emergency. Now, Trump's response tells you everything you need to know about where this is heading. Minutes after the vote closed, Trump fired off a social media post threatening every Republican who dared to vote against his tariffs. Any Republican, in the House or the Senate, that votes against tariffs will seriously suffer the consequences come election time. And that includes primaries. That's a direct quote. Think about that for a moment. The President of the United States didn't respond with economic data. He didn't present evidence that the tariffs are working. He didn't explain how calling Canada a national security threat makes any strategic sense. He threatened his own party members with political destruction. That's not the behavior of someone operating from a position of strength. That's the behavior of someone who just watched his policy foundation crack in real time and has nothing left but intimidation. And here's what makes the timing absolutely brutal for the White House. This vote landed on the same day the Congressional Budget Office, a nonpartisan institution, released its Economic Outlook report. The findings? U.S. businesses are absorbing 30% of increased import costs by slashing their own profit margins and passing the remaining 70% directly to American consumers through higher prices. 70%. That's not a negotiating tactic. That's a tax on American families, validated by Congress's own budget analysts, published on the same day Congress voted to reject the emergency that created it. Dear viewers, let's talk about what comes next, because this fight is far from over, but the trajectory has shifted dramatically. Yes, even if the Senate passes this same resolution with a simple majority, Trump retains veto power. He can keep the emergency declaration alive. He can maintain the tariffs. On paper, nothing changes tomorrow morning. But politically, everything just changed. This vote is a symbol. It's proof, written into the congressional record, that a majority of the House of Representatives, including members of Trump's own party, believes the tariffs on Canada are unjustified, economically destructive, and based on a manufactured emergency. That's not Ottawa's opinion anymore. That's the official position of the U.S. House. And there's a second front closing in. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments in early November on the legality of tariffs imposed through national emergency declarations. A decision could land as early as February 20th. That's next week. If the court rules against the broad use of emergency powers for trade policy, every single tariff Trump has built on this foundation collapses. Not just the ones on Canada, all of them. Trump is now fighting on three fronts simultaneously. His own House just rebuked him. The Senate could follow. And the Supreme Court is preparing to weigh in on whether his entire tariff architecture is even constitutional. Meanwhile, Canada's position grows stronger with each passing week. Ottawa didn't need to escalate. Ottawa didn't need to match Trump's chaos with chaos of its own. The strategy was patience, professionalism, and an unshakable confidence that the truth would eventually surface inside Washington itself. And that's exactly what happened. The truth surfaced. Not from foreign pressure, not from international tribunals, From American lawmakers in American districts watching American families pay higher prices because their president decided to call America's closest ally a national security threat. 6 Republicans looked at that absurdity and said, enough. 219 members of Congress looked at that absurdity and voted to end it. The Congressional Budget Office quantified the damage and published it for the world to see. This is what strategic patience looks like when it works. This is what happens when a country refuses to be provoked into mistakes and instead lets the evidence build until it becomes undeniable. Canada didn't need to win this argument in Ottawa. Canada needed this argument to be won in Washington. And tonight, that's exactly what started happening. The trade war isn't over. The tariffs are still in place. But the political consensus that protected them just shattered. And once that kind of consensus breaks, dear viewers, it doesn't come back together easily. If this analysis helped you understand what just shifted in the Canada-U.S. relationship, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Canada Next if you haven't already. This is the channel that cuts through the noise and shows you what's actually happening. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. The game just changed, and Canada is exactly where it needs to be.